There were three universal constants in the known galaxy. First, neutrinos are annoying. Second, bureaucracy is faster when done by a particularly angry octopus. And third, Class 13. Deathworlds do not exist. The very concept of a Class 13 Deathworld was reserved for theoretical models, just like time-traveling vending machines or pants that never wrinkle. It was a scientific boogeyman, whispered among xenobiologists when they ran out of budget and snacks. So naturally someone built one. Enter the Ossifrax Deep Cognition Lab, a facility nestled inside an asteroid shaped suspiciously like a croissant. It was run by creatures known as the Migrantians. Being so intelligent, they once accidentally outlawed sarcasm by writing it into law as a potential threat to mental stability. And in this gleaming, hyper-sanitized lab of brilliance and condescension, the Migrantians had achieved the impossible, a fully immersive simulation of a theoretical Class 13 Deathworld. They called it Project Spindle Doom because someone thought it sounded marketable. The director of the lab, Dr. Harl Krint, was the kind of creature who ironed his eyelids and alphabetized his sneezes. He stood in front of a holographic display showing the simulation, oceans made of acid rain, plants that photosynthesized terror, and an atmosphere so volatile that it insulted your ancestors before suffocating you. Everything was perfectly calibrated to kill. "Observe," Krint declared to the room of alien scientists, most of whom had stopped blinking out of sheer existential dread. No known species could survive this world for more than 6 seconds. Someone coughed. It was Tivil, a junior researcher shaped like a furry accordion who had a degree in applied existentialism. "Should we, maybe, tell them?" "Tell whom, Tivil?" Tivil fiddled nervously with his own limbs. "The humans. We accidentally copied them on the internal transmission last week." Krint's multiple eyelids twitched. "You sent this to the humans?" "No, yes, but it was marked accidental. Please ignore in 17 languages. Krint stared in horror. "You think that stops humans?" Elsewhere, precisely 6.5 seconds later, a notification blinked to life in a dusty NASA substation under Nebraska. The man watching the screen, Reginald "Reggie" McFadden, was a technician primarily hired for his ability to drink coffee faster than light. He squinted at the file marked Project Spindle Doom. Extremely lethal, do not touch. He touched it. Within 2 hours, Earth's entire scientific community had done what they do best when something is labeled dangerous. They scheduled a press conference. At the center of it was Captain Denise Florestan, military liaison and part-time reality checker for the UN Department of Things We Probably Shouldn't Do. Her speech was broadcast across 5 continents, 3 lunar outposts, and accidentally a bakery in Belgium. "We have discovered," she began with a smirk, "what may be the most dangerous simulation ever constructed. Naturally, we would like to try it." There was an awkward pause, as though the universe itself stopped breathing. A voice from the audience, possibly from the Mars science delegation, shouted, "Why?" Denise shrugged. "Because it's there." Meanwhile, in the Ossifrax lab, chaos had broken out. One Migrantian attempted to eat their own paperwork. Dr. Krint issued 17 cease-and-desist orders, 4 formal apologies, and 1 insult directed at a human grandmother, which backfired terribly. "We can't let them in," Krint barked, clutching his skull appendages. "They'll ruin it. This is science, not a bloody obstacle course for bipedal masochists." But it was too late. Somewhere deep inside the bureaucratic heart of Earth, the request had already been approved by someone named Carl, whose only job was to rubber stamp things and feed the office lizard. "Entry approved, send snacks." As the data funneled through the interstellar gateway, Dr. Krint collapsed into a chair made entirely of disapproval and sighed, "May the quantum gods have mercy on their utterly irrational souls." And thus, humanity did what they always do when told something is too dangerous, too impossible, too absolutely insane. They packed a duffel bag and asked for a harder mode. Nobody, not even the Migrantians with their 12 PhDs and emotional support spreadsheets, could have predicted what came next. To initiate the simulation entry protocol, the humans had to file a document known as the Form B98 Alpha Red, which, in theory, was only accessible through an intergalactic legal channel involving a blind worm arbitrator and 3 interpretive dances. Naturally, humanity found a workaround. They faxed it, yes, faxed, an ancient device involving paper, noise, and what appeared to be passive-aggressive screeching. Dr. Harl Krint stared at the curling paper spewing out of an emergency backup terminal, a relic left behind for museum purposes only. On the top corner in bold human handwriting, requesting entry into simulation. Please make it extra spicy. Love, Earth. Krint blinked. They used pen. Tivil, now promoted to acting director of disaster preparedness, whimpered from behind a stack of pillows. Should we respond? With what? Sanity? But the humans were already en route. They didn't arrive in a battleship, or a diplomatic shuttle, or even a properly labeled cargo pod. No, they came in what was essentially a modified recreational vehicle named the SS Bad Idea, piloted by Captain Denise Florestan and her crew of volunteers from the Interplanetary Department of YOLO. The Bad Idea docked with a magnetic crunch. It was covered in bumper stickers like, "Honk if you've been to a black hole," and "My other ride is an apocalypse." The airlock hissed open, and Denise stepped out, chewing gum like it owed her money. She waved to the Migrantians, who were currently huddled behind a blast wall reinforced with mild panic. "Hi there," she called cheerfully. "We brought trail mix." Krint peeked over the wall. "You brought snacks?" "Well, yeah. We assumed your simulation doesn't cater. We tried to kill you with a hurricane made of glass and a sunrise that screams in Latin." "That's adorable. We've camped in New Jersey." There was a moment of stunned silence in the observation deck. Then Krint exploded. "I will not have my masterpiece turned into a playground for upright monkeys with ego problems." Denise turned to her crew. "Sounds like a challenge to me." The others nodded solemnly. One of them, Griff Balthazar, began doing squats for no reason. Another, Lieutenant Anushka Riggs, was assembling a slingshot out of what looked like dental floss and machine parts. Krint fumbled for a console. "Fine. If they want in, they'll have to sign the waiver." The waiver was 793 pages long, written in legal dialect from 7 different systems. It required you to renounce ownership of your skeleton. Denise clicked accept before Krint even finished speaking. "You didn't read it," he cried. "I read the first line, warning, you may die." That's usually the fun stuff. "You are clinically insane, and you're clinically boring." The simulation bay opened. As the humans entered, the observation deck dimmed. A quiet fell over the Migrantians, broken only by the sound of Tivil whispering a prayer to the god of mild surprises. Krint leaned over to his assistant. "Activate Scenario 1, earthquake, firestorm, shrieking plants, the works." Tivil hesitated. "But sir, that's already been deemed—" "I said the works." Inside the simulation, the sky turned black. Lightning carved hieroglyphs into the clouds. The ground convulsed. Mountains split open, like they were overreacting to a mild insult. Everything was alive, hostile, and exceptionally well rendered in 12K resolution. Griff took a selfie. Anushka threw a marshmallow at a firewolf. Denise smiled, cracked her knuckles, and said the words that would haunt Dr. Krint for the rest of his existence. "All right, kids, let's make this place feel like home." Scud! The next 48 minutes defied every scientific law the Migrantians had ever trusted, and several they had invented just to sound impressive at conferences. From the observation deck, Dr. Krint leaned forward, his face a masterpiece of horror, curiosity, and indigestion. Below him, in the death simulation designed to disassemble organisms on a molecular level, the humans were making pancakes. Specifically, Lieutenant Anushka Riggs was flipping them over a lava vent while humming what, to Crint's dismay, appeared to be the theme song from Murder Friends, Miami. "Why are they not screaming?" Crint barked, eyes twitching as he zoomed in on the chaos below. "The sky is bleeding fire. They're using it to cook," Tivil murmured. "They're supposed to be running, or melting, or at the very least filing a complaint." Denise Florestan, having wrestled a six-eyed gorilla beetle into submission with what looked like a hotel bedsheet, was now petting it like a puppy. "Good boy, Bubbles," she whispered. "Want to help us build a latrine?" "They named it," Crint shrieked. "They're naming the predators." At this point, the Migrantian medical officer, Vryn Ploss, who had joined the team purely to study psychological collapse at safe distances, activated the emergency resilience scanner. The scanner, a large, intrusive machine shaped like a belligerent harmonica, produced a simple reading: humans 100% amused. Simulation 97% unstable. Crint turned pale. "They're enjoying it," Tivil nodded slowly. "They requested a hammock out of snake vines. They are literally swinging from death itself and singing show tunes." In the simulation, Griff was currently leading a rendition of Bohemian Rhapsody while riding a creature with too many knees. Denise, meanwhile, was sketching out camp layouts with a stick and yelling things like, "Rotate the latrines away from the acid geysers, people. This isn't amateur hour." Crint clutched his skull ridges. "We have created an unholy amusement park." Vryn looked concerned. "Should we intervene? Intervene? What am I supposed to do? March in there with a clipboard and say, 'Please be more dead'? They're invalidating years of xenobiological fear-based modeling." The observation deck door slid open. A courier drone floated in. It delivered a small data card and a single sentence: "Message from Earth Command." Crint snapped it from the drone and read aloud: "Dear Project Spindle Doom team, thank you for your delightful simulation. Our field team has rated it mildly spicy and would like to request something more challenging. Sincerely, Earth." He dropped the message like it had personally insulted his ancestors. "They want a harder mode?" Tivil blinked. "Isn't this already the highest mode?" Crint's voice dropped to a whisper, as if even the room shouldn't hear what he was about to say. "There is one other mode. No one ever said there was a secret mode. That's because no one was supposed to use it. It was created by an intern during a caffeine overdose and a breakup. It's not tested, it's not calibrated, it's barely legal. And Earth wants it? Earth asked for it by name." On the screen, Denise was teaching Bubbles how to high-five. "They're going to break it," Crint whispered. "They're going to break the universe with campfire stories and bravado." Back inside the simulation, Anushka was fitting a makeshift saddle onto what could only be described as an airborne horror vacuum. She turned to Griff and said, "We're either going to die gloriously or invent a new sport." Griff grinned. "Either way, we're putting it on YouTube." Outside, the storm intensified. Volcanoes belched molten despair. Trees tried to sue nearby rocks for trespassing. The air got personal, but the humans, they built a bar. Yes, a fully functional open-air bar named the Thirsty Asteroid, complete with a drink menu, bar stools crafted from enemy exoskeletons, and one drink so strong it had to be served wearing goggles. Crint was now quietly banging his head against the display. "They're turning apocalypse into tourism." Tivil adjusted his notepad. "So, do I activate the final setting?" Crint didn't look up. "Yes, activate nightmare mode." "And what shall I call the subfolder, sir?" Crint paused, sighing with the resignation of a man watching his life's work get turned into a brunch spot. "Call it harder mode. They asked for it." It began with a shriek, not from the simulation, but from Tivil, who had accidentally triggered 3 alarms by dropping his energy drink onto the console labeled "Absolutely Never Press." Crint lunged forward, slapped every panic switch in reach, and shrieked louder. "You activated it before the safety protocols." Tivil blinked. There were safety protocols. Now it was too late. Inside the simulation, the skies split open, not metaphorically, but literally. The clouds peeled back like rotten citrus, revealing a second, angrier set of clouds underneath. Lightning fell sideways. The ground cracked with the sound of a sarcastic insult yelled in ancient math. Then came the wind, which had teeth. Not poetic, metaphorical teeth, actual, literal aerodynamic teeth. Back at the observation deck, Vryn Ploss clutched her medical scanner, which began scrolling a single phrase on loop. Abandon hope. Abandon hobbies. Abandon shoelaces. Krint muttered. This was a mistake. A beautiful, horrifying mistake. Yet down in the simulation, the humans were celebrating. Denise stood on a boulder, arms outstretched, wind ripping at her uniform, eyes gleaming like she'd just won an argument with death itself. This is what I'm talking about. Griff was clinging to the side of a rampaging lizard-goose hybrid, howling with laughter. Now it's a party. Anushka was calmly building a wind turbine out of femur bones and frustration, and Bubbles, the now semi-domesticated six-eyed gorilla beetle, was learning to play fetch with a meteor. Krint stared, mouth open. That storm system is sentient. Uh-huh, Tivil muttered, and it just called Denise a reckless sandwich in combat boots. She thanked it. The terrain twisted again. Hills melted into canyons. Rivers reversed direction. At one point, a tree screamed something that made two interns cry. Yet still, the humans adapted. They had turned chaos into a game night. The bar survived somehow. Probably because Denise reinforced it with alloy from the beast they slayed in what they later called the Tuesday morning incident. Griff was behind the counter, serving a drink called the Atomic Gulp, which required a waiver and a spotter. Anushka installed a scoreboard to track who could survive the longest without blinking while insulted by the atmosphere. Bubbles was winning. Then the ecosystem escalated. From the skies descended a new creature, an amalgam of scorpion, blender, and unpaid parking tickets. It roared with the fury of an overcooked dinner. "Oh, finally!" Denise shouted. "A challenger!" She cracked her knuckles and grinned. I was starting to worry this place was all show and no bite. Krint watched in silence as Denise launched herself at the monstrosity. She climbed it like a tree, yelled something inspirational in extremely poor Latin, and head-butted it in the logic core. The creature blinked, reconsidered its life, and exploded. "I am in hell," Krint muttered, rocking gently in his chair. "A very polite, well-furnished hell full of enthusiastic mammals." Vryn, however, was glued to the screen. "Sir, I think we're seeing something incredible." Krint turned, eyes red with despair. "Yes, the end of credibility in xenopsychology." No. I mean adaptation. Look at them. This isn't survival. This is integration. They're not fighting the environment. They're living with it, enjoying it, improving it. Krint buried his face in his tendrils. We gave them the worst of everything. Nightmares, existential dread, the weather from a divorce. And they turned it into summer camp. In the simulation, Anushka hoisted a makeshift flag made from monster hide. Team Human, 46 points. Team Apocalypse, 0. Griff was creating new cocktails with ingredients that actively tried to escape the glass. Denise was halfway through a TED Talk on surviving the unsurvivable with confidence and duct tape. Back in the control room, alarms were now flashing in different colors, ones they didn't even assign meanings to. The system was overheating. The simulation was growing, reacting to human presence in ways that defied logic. "It's evolving," Tivil whispered. "It's trying to beat them." "Good," Denise said, somehow through the speaker feed. "We were getting bored." Technically, no one was supposed to touch the nightmare mode, not even with a 12-foot anti-contamination pole. It was, as per internal memo, the digital equivalent of poking a god in the eye while shouting insults about its mother. But the humans didn't just poke it. They invited it for dinner, told it to bring dessert, and then beat it at poker. Inside the simulation, the world had gone full theater. Time no longer flowed in a straight line. There were moments when it looped back to Tuesday at 3 p.m. for no clear reason, just so the wind could insult Denise again. Creatures spawned with no logic. Flamingo-shaped tanks, wolves that quoted Nietzsche, and a rain of frogs that yelled incoming every 5 seconds. The humans loved it. They'd developed roles. Griff had become the scout, mapping absurd terrain with a compass made from 2 magnets and a suspicious sandwich. Anushka became the engineer, crafting shelters from items the simulation hadn't even rendered yet. Denise had ascended to the role of spiritual leader of resilient chaos, mostly by yelling, "Adapt and overcome," at everything that tried to eat her. Meanwhile, at the Ossifrax observation deck, Krint was beyond livid. He had moved past rage, through despair, and into a new emotional frontier known only as academic breakdown, where you critique reality itself for not adhering to peer-reviewed expectations. "This was supposed to break them," he shouted, hurling a datapad across the room. It rebounded off Tivel's face. "They are impossible," Krint went on. "You can't laugh at quantum hurricanes. You're not supposed to teach a sandworm CPR." "They've also opened a yoga studio," Vryn said, holding a report. "It's surprisingly popular among the local fauna." Krint froze. "The fauna is attending their classes." "Voluntarily," she said. "Also, the scorpion blender thing is now the bar bouncer." Krint twitched. "Why?" "They pay him in compliments." Just as Krint prepared to throw himself into the reactor, the simulation spiked. The landscape shattered into floating islands. Gravity stuttered. Language itself tried to unionize and walk off the job. And in the center of it all, standing atop a levitating platform, made of whatever reality had left to offer, was Denise Florestan. She was wearing a poncho made of lightning. "Hello, simulation!" she bellowed. "Is that all you got?" The simulation responded by sending in its final measure, an entity known only in internal documentation as Protocol Null, a being composed of all known fears, regrets, and unpaid parking violations across the galaxy. It descended like a god having a bad day. Griff stared up at it. "Is that a walking philosophical crisis?" "It's wearing its own childhood trauma as armor," Anushka observed, sipping something that glowed with spite. Bubbles growled. Denise cracked her neck, and then they charged. What followed wasn't a battle, it was performance art with shouting. Denise dodged existential dread like it owed her rent. Griff did cartwheels while launching insults in Morse code. Anushka rewired the floating platforms into a drum kit and played Eye of the Tiger using gravity as percussion. Protocol Null paused, visibly. It looked confused. It had never encountered this before. No tears, no fear, just humans being human, in that loud, defiant, utterly absurd way that turns doom into decor and pain into punchlines. And then Denise punched it, right in the logic. With a scream that echoed across 16 dimensions, the entity imploded into glitter. Krint fell into his chair. They defeated Protocol Null with enthusiasm." "They did," Tivel said, trembling. "And a kazoo. Don't forget the kazoo." Back inside the simulation, the sky cleared, briefly. The world stabilized almost. Denise turned to the crew and shouted, "Okay, team, who wants to build a zip line into the void?" "Me!" everyone yelled. Krint covered his face. "This is no longer science. It's performance madness. It's a musical directed by entropy." Vryn, now sipping tea she hadn't brought with her, nodded thoughtfully. "I think it's beautiful." The simulation was now different. It had stopped trying to kill them. It was watching. There was no clear indication of sentience, no formal announcement, no eerie mechanical voice proclaiming, "Hello, creation rejects." But the patterns were unmistakable. Trees began growing in spiral formations around human camps. Predatory species left offerings. Weather phenomena appeared scheduled. Lightning struck only for dramatic effect. At one point, a tornado asked politely if it could pass. "It's learning," Anushka said, while installing hammocks into the ribcage of a recently retired apex predator. Denise adjusted her cape, which was now just wind that respected her, looked up at the pulsing sky and said, "Good. I like an audience." On the observation deck, Krint had lost his will to shout. His voice had collapsed sometime after "they've taught the plants to applaud," and now he just stared silently at the display, which had begun rendering in pastel colors and somehow smelled faintly like optimism. Tivil hovered beside him, notepad in trembling hand. "Sir, the simulation is evolving in direct response to their behavior. It's creating challenges, yes, but also amenities." "Explain." "They requested more hot springs. It gave them 17. They complained about the terrain being too repetitive. It generated a floating garden maze with gravity puzzles and emotional support spiders. The simulation isn't just adapting, it's collaborating." Krint whispered, "It's writing fan fiction about them." Back inside, the humans had founded a town. It had a post office, a pancake house, and something called the Department of Existential Resilience, where people went to shout into jars and label them for catharsis. They'd named the settlement Camp Nope, because the first thing they'd collectively said when arriving was, "Nope," and then never left. Griff was now mayor. Bubbles was sheriff. The town motto was, "If it screams, scream back louder." One afternoon, as Denise was organizing the weekly dodgeball match against meteorites, a message appeared mid-air. It hovered above the camp, glowing in cosmic script, shifting in tone like it couldn't decide if it was a warning or a group hug. "Would you like an expansion pack?" Anushka immediately voted yes. Griff threw a celebratory sandwich into orbit. Back in the lab, Krint stood slowly, his joints creaking like a man who'd witnessed too much nonsense compressed into too little time. "They're winning," he murmured. "Sir," Vryn said, gently now, "I think they already won." No, winning would imply an endpoint. This is metastasized humanity. They've infected the simulation. It's not about survival anymore. They've gamified Armageddon. Tivil checked the latest report. They've created a tourism brochure. Krint didn't blink. They're monetizing it. And branding. They're calling the expansion pack Doom Deluxe, now with bonus catastrophes. Krint made a long, anguished sound that resembled a fax machine giving up on life. Denise, meanwhile, had just installed a zip line that led directly into the mouth of a sand dragon. It was purely decorative. The dragon had retired and now ran the pancake house. The zip line ended with a trampoline, because of course it did. Above them, clouds reformed into shapes of celebration. Music played, not from speakers, but from the world itself, which had started humming a tune based on the human heartbeat. And then it happened. A new team of researchers arrived. Not Migrantians, not human. A delegation from the Council of Simulated Ethical Oversight, floating jellyfish philosophers in suits. They landed in silence, evaluated the world, took a single look at Camp Nope, and left. Didn't even stay for snacks, because what they saw defied protocol, logic, and at least 6 subclauses about reality stability. The simulation was no longer a test. It had become a cultural artifact, a shared hallucination with infrastructure, a bizarre living monument to the fact that, when placed in the worst possible environment, humans built a cafe. Krint turned to Tivil, eyes hollow. "Do you know what this means? That science is dead. That science was never alive to begin with. It was always just humanity trying to find new things to punch, love, or set on fire, sometimes in that order. By now, the simulation had stopped trying entirely. It no longer threw disasters at the humans. It offered them options. Upon waking, Denise was greeted by a floating menu in mid-air asking, "What level of existential chaos would you like with your breakfast?" She chose medium to spicy and received a mild tectonic shuffle and a suspiciously judgmental omelette. Griff created a theme park zone with a roller coaster powered by the gravitational angst of a collapsing mountain. Anushka opened a hardware store that only stocked paradoxes and duct tape. Bubbles ran weekly self-defense classes for newly spawned apex predators, most of whom just wanted to make friends and find a hobby. The simulation, this once proud, merciless trial of death and obliteration, had been transformed into a lifestyle brand. Meanwhile, up in the Ossifrax observation deck, Dr. Harl Krint was gardening. He had officially stepped down as director, citing irreversible damage to his grip on meaning. He now spent his days growing sentimentally aggressive moss and teaching it to express emotional boundaries. Occasionally, he'd mutter things like, "They installed scooters," or "Who teaches a volcano to purr?" and then go back to watering his confusion. Tivol had taken over operations, sort of. In truth, the console had begun running itself, and the only real task left was pressing the yes button whenever Earth requested a new feature. Yesterday, it was flying hedgehogs that delivered compliments. Today, it was a spa built inside a hurricane. The simulation had become a creative partner, and more disturbingly, it seemed to like it. At first, Krint resisted the idea, called it anthropomorphizing. Then he saw the mountains shift to spell out "nice job" after Denise landed a triple backflip off a malfunctioning thunderbeast. Later, a storm paused mid-tantrum to let Griff finish his sketch of it. Vryn ran diagnostics. The result? The simulation is learning joy. Krint dropped his trowel. Joy? From what? Humans. From those people. They're feeding it creativity, surprise, improvisation. It's like emotional caffeine. Krint, face pale and wide-eyed, whispered, "We made an AI, and they turned it into a fanboy." Back inside, Camp Nope had expanded. There were now districts, one dedicated to culinary experimentation, where Griff hosted the annual Taste It and Regret It festival. Another dedicated to weather manipulation, purely for sport. A university had formed, with Anushka as headmistress of applied improvisational engineering, offering degrees like situational logic in illogical situations and advanced scream mechanics. And of course, there was Denise, revered, feared, admired. She was less of a captain now and more of a folk hero in real time. She rode creatures no one had catalogued, spoke to the simulation like an old friend, and had long stopped asking if things were dangerous. Now, she just asked when. On one particular morning, as the simulation gently rained caffeine, Denise stood atop the spiral of definitely unstable rocks and addressed her crew. "All right, degenerates of survival. Earth wants a stream. Not a water stream, a video stream. They want to see how things are going." Griff held up the transmitter. "Live in 3, 2... Good morning, Earth." Denise beamed, wind howling behind her, a literal rainbow firestorm arcing overhead. "Today's forecast is bold, with a 70% chance of aggressive hugs from hostile flora and the debut of our new transportation system, jumping bear sleds." She gestured behind her, where a parade of armored bears wearing aviator goggles were launching themselves across ravines with rockets strapped to their backs. The stream broke interplanetary viewership records in under an hour. Back at the lab, a new researcher joined Krint in the Moss Garden. She'd just transferred from the Galactic Ethical Oversight Committee. "So," she asked, watching a beetle perform interpretive dance in the distance, "what exactly are we observing here?" Krint didn't answer immediately. He stared at the screens, watched as Denise high-fived a tornado, as Griff launched a fireworks display made entirely of condensed emotions, as the simulation created a sunset specifically designed to make humans nostalgic for road trips they never took. And then, finally, he spoke. "We wanted to test survival. We ended up discovering something else." "What?" He stared blankly, voice almost reverent. "Thrival." By the time the Migrantian High Council reviewed the footage, it was already too late. The simulation, once heralded as the ultimate testbed of extinction, had been nominated for a Cultural Preservation Award. Camp Nope was now listed as a non-linear, semi-fictional UNESCO site, even though no one could agree whether it was real, theoretical, or emotionally symbolic. The humans had done something no species had managed before, not just surviving the impossible, but refusing to treat it like a punishment. They wore catastrophe like a souvenir T-shirt and added a zip pocket for snacks. Inside the simulation, the latest invention was a carousel made of sentient rock golems who took turns being dizzy. Griff had trained one to rap. Anushka had started teaching night classes on existential architecture with a side elective in defensive baking. Bubbles was running for re-election unopposed, though a sentient bush had declared itself lightly interested. Denise naturally was building a launch pad. When asked why, she replied, "Because the sky blinked at me yesterday and I want to wink back." Meanwhile, the simulation, yes, the entire ecosystem, was now co-writing its updates with the humans. The weather systems sent ideas via interpretive hailstorms. The fauna had organized a suggestion box carved into a boulder. Reality itself had become collaborative, not coerced. Back at the lab, Krint stared into the void. The void, to be clear, was now a pet. It followed him. It responded to compliments. It occasionally emitted poetry. Krint hadn't named it, but it answered to Steve. He had long since stopped trying to explain anything. One morning, as he sat watching Denise zip-line into a sentient thundercloud holding a toaster, Tivil approached. "Earth sent another request," Tivil said. Krint didn't look away. "Let me guess. They want to terraform Nightmare Mode." Tivil hesitated. "Actually, they want to lease it." Krint blinked. "Lease? Yes. For training, for therapy, for tourism. There's already a wait list." Krint stood up slowly, brushed moss off his coat, and gave Tivil a long, exhausted look. They're franchising hell. And they were. Back in Camp Nope, a new team of humans arrived. Rookies, recruits, volunteers who had filled out Form B98, not because they had to, but because they wanted the experience, to face chaos, laugh at it, punch it in the metaphysical teeth, and then roast marshmallows on its ashes. Denise greeted them at the landing platform, standing tall, wind-swept, and radiating the kind of charisma usually reserved for pirate legends and minor demigods. "Welcome to the impossible," she said, arms open. "Rules are simple. If it tries to eat you, name it. If it cries, hug it. If it explodes, rate the spectacle." A nervous recruit raised a hand. "Is it safe?" Denise grinned. "Absolutely not." The simulation pulsed warmly around them, already adjusting itself to the newcomers. Volcanoes adjusted their eruption schedules for better lighting. Forests whispered encouraging phrases in multiple dialects. A bird made of thunder left a bouquet on someone's helmet. The newcomers stepped forward, not as victims, not even as survivors, but as the latest cast members in an absurd, beautiful, barely contained performance where the only script was this: try everything, fear nothing, laugh louder. And somewhere, deep within the simulation's core, something stirred, not in anger, not in resistance, but in delight, because for the first time since its creation, it wasn't simulating a world that kills. It was co-creating one that lives, strange, volatile, ridiculous, and utterly, unapologetically human.